Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, teaming up with SD1 Sports to deliver you Big Ten football previews for Week 1. We are going to go through all 14 Big Ten teams and get you set for Week 1 around the conference. This is the first Big Ten team in action. It's going to be on Thursday night, August 29th, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can catch the game on FS1, and that game would be Minnesota hosting South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits coming off another fine season at 10-3, 6-2 in division play. Minnesota at 7-6, 3-6. We'll get to the Gophers in just a second. The Jackrabbits, they are building a program. They've got a head coach there in John Stiegelmeier, who's been there for 22 years. He's seen some rougher days at 158 and 100, his lifetime record there at the school, but in recent years, he has built a winner and a contender for the FCS crown. They made it to the semifinals last year, the furthest they've made it in a long time, before they lost to North Dakota State, the perennial powerhouse, 44-21. The Jackrabbits were fifth in FCS play. That's 126 teams. They were number 5 in scoring offense at 42.5 points per game. Scoring defense not too shabby as well at number 25 in the nation, giving up 22 points per ball game. But on the offensive side for the Jackrabbits, they lose quarterback Taryn Christian, who's probably the finest quarterback they've ever seen in school history. So he's gone, and they turn the keys over to redshirt freshman Jabor Gibbs. Redshirt freshman has never started. He gets his first action against a Big Ten opponent on the road in Minneapolis. The running game is mighty strong, led by Pierre Strong, who averaged 9.5 yards per carry last year with 11 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards rushing. But he's not the only guy who carries it out of the South Dakota State backfield. You've got Micah Daniel with 10 touchdowns rushing, and also C.J. Wilson. He broke through with over 6.5 yards per carry as well in 2018. The wide receiver core is stellar as well. So you've got a redshirt freshman quarterback making his first start, but he is surrounded by experienced talent and playmakers, and no one is better than this guy, Cade Johnson. Get these numbers: 1,332 receiving yards and 17 scores for him last year. Adam Anderson is a fine number 2 complement at the wide receiver position, 47 catches and 7 touchdowns. So, if they can get continued quarterback play, South Dakota State once again should be explosive on offense again after averaging over 42 points per game last year. Okay, the story from Minnesota in 2018 was a November to remember after getting off to a rough start. They finished 3-6 in the Big Ten, 7-6 overall. They were not headed toward postseason play. They were headed toward another abysmal season after going 2-7 in the Big Ten in 2017 in P.J. Fleck's first season with the Golden Gophers. But then they suddenly turned it around. Why? I hate to pin it on one guy, but defensive coordinator Rob Smith was fired, and they went from abysmal defensive play, one of the 15 to 20 worst defensive showings statistically in the nation, to one of the best. They had just given up 55 points to lowly Illinois in a loss to the Illini, of all teams, and they turned it around. They turned it around in a huge way down the stretch, beat the likes of Purdue and Wisconsin, played Northwestern, the division champion, down to the wire, then went on to a bowl game in which they took on a 5-3 ACC team in Georgia Tech and beat them by 24 points, 34-10. And again, this is after they fired their defensive coordinator, Rob Smith. They also had a change at quarterback. Zach Ennickstead joined Baker Mayfield as the only quarterbacks in the history of Power 5 football to start Game 1, their true freshman season, as a walk-on. But Zach Ennickstead faltered down the stretch, only completed 51% of his passes, and he was eclipsed by Tanner Morgan. It was going to be another battle for the starting position this fall. However, Zach Ennickstead injured his foot, and he's out indefinitely. So this is Tanner Morgan's team. And again, he led the stretch drive in which the Gophers turned it on toward postseason play, completing 59% of his passes, 9 touchdowns, 6 picks last year. And with a fine receiving core back, those numbers should skyrocket. The 3 top wide receivers are back, including all Big Ten performer Tyler Johnson, who caught 78 last year, 1,169 yards and 12 touchdowns. You also have Rashawn Bateman and Chris Auden-Bell, 2 complimentary receivers who should see their catches, yards, and touchdowns go up with the increased play of Tanner Morgan. The running back position also loaded at Minnesota. Mo Ibrahim ran for 1,160 yards and 9 touchdowns, and he was the number 3 back going into the season. Minnesota fans, Big Ten fans, even national college football fans, you've probably heard of Shannon Brooks and Rodney Smith, and for good reason. They're productive running backs, and they've been around seemingly forever. They are going into the season ages 23 and 22. But really banged up last year. Rodney Smith has eclipsed almost 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in his fine career at Minnesota. He was out for the entire season in 2018, though, excluding one game. He came in, he ran for 154 yards against Indiana, then he was hurt again. Shannon Brooks missed all of 2018, but he's run for almost 2,000 yards in his Minnesota career and 20 touchdowns as well. So, could be a 3-headed monster at running back and wide receiver from Minnesota, highlighted by Ibrahim at running back for the Gophers with almost 1,200 yards last year. And again, Tyler Johnson is the star of the team after catching 12 touchdowns last year. The offensive line features just a mountain of a man in 6'9", 400-pounder at tackle, Daniel Fa'alele. You can pick out the kid along the offensive line. With all the 300, 320, 330-pound kids playing college football, he stands out. He is that monstrous, and he's learning how to play football. And he gained a starting spot for PJ Fleck's team last year. The defense was taken over in November from Rob Smith, and he handed it off to Joe Rossi, who, considering his fine stretch drive at Minnesota, was given the full-time defensive coordinator position. The Gophers lost their 2 top tacklers and their 2 space eaters in the middle at defensive tackle. So that's going to be difficult to replace. The linebacking core is solid, and they bring back probably their best player at that position and probably overall on the defense, and Carter Coughlin, who had 15 tackles for loss and 9.5 sacks. Antoine Winfield was emerging as a top cornerback in the Big Ten in 2017. He was injured early in 2018, basically missed the entire season, and he is back. Minnesota and South Dakota State. The Gophers finished a clean sweep at 4-0 in non-conference play, including the aforementioned Georgia Tech bowl victory, and they beat Fresno State, one of their big wins out of conference in 2018, and they get to travel out to California to take on the Bulldogs in week 2, but it's first South Dakota State, and what I expect to be a pretty difficult test for a Minnesota team that has not been explosive on offense, but has a chance to be if they get an offensive line that is improved, and Tanner Morgan is continuing his development from what we saw in November and in the bowl game in December. Minnesota takes on South Dakota State. We pick the Gophers to win this week 1 matchup at home, 34-23. We'll be back with more Big Ten Week 1 previews right here at SC1 Sports Big Ten.